Hello everyone to the third video of the Python tutorials for beginners series. In this video we'll be covering comments, input and operations. So firstly I want to talk about the print function. So previously in our first video we wrote the print hello world program, and what it does is that it prints hello world in your terminal. Now what this line is that print is a function, and then it starts with a parentheses, and within the parentheses there is a string, and this string is called an argument. So what functions do is that they take in arguments and then they do something with the arguments and give us something. So in this case the print function takes in the hello world string argument and it prints out hello world in the terminal. Functions can also take more than one argument. For example, I'll write hi and run the code again. You can see that it has printed out hello world followed by hi. So what it does, it prints out this string, then it has a space, and then it finally ends with the hi string. So you can add in many more arguments to the print function, and that's how the print function works. Now I want to talk about comments. Comments are ignored by the Python interpreter that reads Python code and executes it, and comments allow us to explain code, and they start with a hash. So for example, the first line is a comment, which is this is a comment followed by the print hello world function. So let me just show you how this works. And you can see that the first comment is completely ignored, and then the hello world function is executed. It takes in the hello world string argument and it prints it out into the terminal. So comments are a great way to explain code, and if you have very long code, this makes it easier to understand it. Next is the input function. The input function allows the user to input something in your Python program, and you need to have a prompt to ask the user for an input. For example, so what happens is that the first line is executed and what is your name is printed out in a terminal. And now what we can do is you can actually type in something like John, and then we press enter. And what happens is that this input function, it asks for an input in the terminal and it returns whatever you have typed to the variable. So let me just print out name. In fact, let's say hello followed by the name. So let's run the code again. I'll type in John in the terminal, and you can see that after typing out John, name became John. The variable name is assigned to the string John, and the print function prints out hello followed by the name, which is John. So hello John. So instead of writing an input as two lines, you can actually put it in a single line. So what we can do here is that the input can take an argument, what is your name, the string, and after it, so what input does is prints it out into the terminal, and then you can type in a name after that and then to press the enter key, and then it prints out hello John. So this is a shorter, more concise way to write inputs in your Python program. Next, let's talk about operations. So operations are used to do calculations, which is very useful in Python. So for example, the first four operations are pretty basic and you've already done it in math, and they are addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. So let's just try it out. So sum is actually a reserved keyword, so let me just start with the caps lock S. Then I'll write 1 plus 1, and let's find out what 1 plus 1 is. So 1 plus 1 turns out to be 2. Alright, So you can just have an operator and numbers beside it, and it's usually a good idea to have spaces beside the operator so that your code is easily readable. So let's try the subtraction operator. So it prints out 0, which is in fact correct because 1 minus 1 is 0. So now let's try multiplication. Let me change the variable name to product. And you can see that 2 times 3 is in fact 6. Finally, let's do division. So let's do 6 divided by 3. We'll get 2.0. So the interesting thing here is that even though 6 and 3 are integers, and when we divide two integers, the Python gives us a float, which is very convenient. So we can do something like 5 divided by 4, and you can see that it also gives 1.25, which is the correct answer. In other programming languages, when you divide an integer by an integer, you usually get an integer, so the answer would be the another language like Java would give 1 instead of 1.25, but Python is very convenient as it automatically converts it to a float. So let's do a few more operations. For example, exponent. So exponent is basically power. So let's try. So if you want to do something like 3 squared, we'll get 9, which is correct because 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. So that's exponent. Now let's do integer division. So what integer division does is it divides the first number and the second number, and then it gives us an integer. And in other languages, this is usually what you get if you use the division operator, but Python decided to give us the integer operator. So when you divide 3 by 2, you will get the quotient. So if you have a quotient, you should also have a remainder, which is what the modulus operator is. The modulus operator is basically a percentage sign. And let me run the code. So 3 divided by 2, you'll get a quotient of 1 and a remainder of 1. Let's try 5 modulo 4. Run the code. Again, your remainder is 1. Let's try 6. And your remainder is 2. So that's how the modulo operator works. Now I want to talk about the order of operations. The order of operations is BEDMAS. So the order of operation is BEDMAS. So the P stands for parentheses, and anything within a parentheses is calculated first, followed by E, which stands for exponential. Then D stands for division, M stands for multiplication, then addition, then finally subtraction. So let me comment that out. So that will be ignored by the Python interpreter. So let's try something like 2 plus 2 times 3. So you can see that the answer is 8, which is correct because 2 times 3 is 6, and then 6 plus 2 is 8. So let's add in a parentheses to do 2 plus 2 first, and it actually gives us 12 because 2 plus 2 is 4 and 4 times 3 is 12. Now let's make a simple addition program. So what I'll do is num1 input, enter first number, then num2 enter second number, and then let's print out the sum. We have to first calculate the sum. And let's run the code. So let's type in 1 and 2, so we expect 3, but we get 12. So why is that? The reason is that the input function returns a string. So num1 is currently a string and num2 is also a string. Let me show you that. So you can see that, let me just put in the input. So what it does is it prints out class stir, which is string. So num1 is in fact a string. And when you add two strings together, what happens is that the two strings are concatenated. So let me say hello. So you can see that I get hello there because what it does, it takes hello and then concatenates it with there. So we can also replace this with a number. And I get 12 because 1 and 2 are concatenated. So the way to solve this is to convert this string into an integer, and the way to do that is to use the int function. Now let me clean up the code. And we get our correct answer, which is 3. So now let's do a simple practice problem, and we need to write a program that asks a user to input a positive dividend and positive divisor and then print out the quotient and remainder. So here's a sample uh, output in the terminal. So you need to first ask for an input, which is the dividend, and then another input for divisor, and then you have to print out the quotient and the remainder. So please pause the video and try out the practice problem, and then I'll go through the solution. So I hope that you have tried out the practice problem, and now let's go through the solution. So firstly, we need to take in a user input for dividend, and it's usually a good idea to use meaningful variable names. So I'll use the variable name dividend input followed by the prompt, which is enter dividend. Next, I'll write out divisor. So now we have found out the dividend and divisor. Next, let's find out the quotient. And the quotient can be found out by using the integer division operator. And then next we have to find the remainder, which uses the modulo operator. And finally we need to output the quotient is 4 and the remainder is 1. So the quotient is, and then we can simply put in quotient. So now we have the print statements to give us the quotient and remainder. And in the print statement, you can also add in an integer or any other data type, and the print function will automatically convert it to a string and print it out. So let's run the program. So over here, we typed out 9 for the dividend. So let me just write 9, and divisor is 2. Unfortunately, we'll get an error, and if you can find the error, then think about it, then I'll show you what the error will be. So let me press enter, and you can see we get an error called type error, unsupported operand type for integer division, str and str. So what we forgot to do was to convert dividend and divisor back into integer or float. So you can use either integer or float, but currently it's in a string, so you cannot use integer division for two different strings. So to solve this issue is quite simple. We can simply use the int function again, Now let's run the code. Dividend will be 9 again, divisor will be 2, and we got the correct answer. So quotient is 4 and remainder is 1. So one more thing is that you don't need to add a space after is, because print function automatically adds a space. So let's add a few comments. Like for example, I can write in user input, then over here I can write in uh, calculation, and so yeah, so the comments make it easier to understand the code, and again the comments are ignored by the Python interpreter. So I can type in 9 for the dividend, 2 for the divisor, and I'll get quotient is 4 and remainder is 1. So you can try this out with other numbers, positive numbers, uh, and yeah, that's about it for this video.